Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 14 college football rankings. So, going over last week's rankings, what those teams did in Week 13. Last week, at number 10, I had Georgia. They destroyed UMass at 59-21. Ninth, I had Ole Miss. They were upset by Florida, losing 24-17. 8 was SMU. They easily beat Virginia at 33-7. 7 was Alabama. They got demolished by Oklahoma, losing 24-3. Sixth, I had Indiana. They lost to Ohio State 38-15. Fifth, I had Penn State. They barely beat Minnesota 26-25. 4 was Notre Dame. They dominated Army 49-14. 3 was Texas. They easily beat Kentucky 31-14. 2 was Ohio State. They easily beat Indiana 38-15. And 1 was Oregon, who was on a bye. But getting into this week's rankings, beginning things at number 10, I've got Indiana. So I have Indiana falling from number 6 to number 10 after they lost to Ohio State 38-15. But it was tough to figure out where to rank Indiana because they're 10-1, but the one time they played a good team this season, they lost by 23. I can understand putting them a little bit higher or a little bit lower. In fact, if Boise State didn't only beat Wyoming by 4, I'd probably have Boise State here at 10. But I do have Indiana at number 10. They lost to Ohio State 38-15. It wasn't a great game for them. They started off strong with a opening drive touchdown, but then they were shut out until a garbage time touchdown. The Indiana offense struggled quite a bit. Curtis Roy completed under half his passes for just 68 yards, and Indiana as a team had just 153 total yards. Then defensively for Indiana, they weren't terrible, but obviously allowing 38 points isn't good. But Indiana, after their first loss of the season, I have them at number 10. Ninth, I have Tennessee. So Tennessee enters at number 9 after their dominant 56-0 win over UTEP. It was a good bounce-back win for Tennessee after their loss to Georgia a couple weeks ago. Tennessee's offense was great with 56 points. Quarterback Nico Iamaleava threw 4 touchdowns, and Tennessee as a team ran for 241 yards and another 4 scores. Then defensively, Tennessee dominated, not allowing a point, and forcing 3 turnovers. And Tennessee, after a dominant win over UTEP, they're at number 9. Eighth, I have Miami. So Miami moves up to number 8 after they demolished Wake Forest by a score of 42-14. This was the first game for Miami after they were upset by Georgia Tech a couple weeks ago, but they were great in this game. They started off a little slow, leading just 17-14 at the half, but then in the second half they outscored Wake Forest 22-0 and ended up with a dominant win. Cam Ward had another great game with 280 yards and 3 total touchdowns, although he did throw an interception. Miami also ran the football very effectively, rushing for 228 yards, and receiver Jacoby George found the end zone twice. Then defensively for Miami, they were good, holding Wake Forest to just 14 points and under 200 yards. But Miami, after a good bounce-back win, they're at number 8. Seventh, I have Georgia. So Georgia enters at number 7 after they beat UMass 59-21. This was actually a pretty close game early on for Georgia, but then their offense started firing on all cylinders, and they dominated the rest of the way. Carson Beck threw for 297 yards and 4 touchdowns. Running back Nate Frazier had a big game with 136 yards and 3 touchdowns. Then defensively for Georgia, allowing 21 points and 350 yards to UMass isn't great, but they did get the win. And now getting to the SEC championship game was unlikely for Georgia, especially this week. But with all the chaos that happened this week, especially in the SEC, Georgia actually clinched a spot in the SEC championship game, and they'll play the winner of Texas against Texas A&M. But Georgia, after their win over UMass, they also clinched a spot in the SEC championship, and I have them at number 7. Sixth, I have SMU. So SMU enters at number 6 after they easily beat Virginia 33-7. The SMU offense was great. Kevin Jennings threw for 323 yards and had 3 total touchdowns, 2 through the air, 1 on the ground. The SMU run game wasn't great with 111 yards and just 3.2 yards a carry. But defensively, SMU dominated, not allowing a point until the 4th quarter, and holding Virginia to just 173 total yards. But with the win, SMU also clinched a spot in the ACC championship game, and I have them at number 6. Getting into the top 5, at number 5, I have Penn State. So Penn State remains at number 5 after they barely beat Minnesota 26-25, and this was not a good game for Penn State. They trailed for most of the game against a decent Minnesota team. The Penn State offense was okay. Drew Auer threw for 244 yards and a touchdown, although Penn State didn't run the ball effectively, averaging just 3.5 yards a carry. Then defensively for Penn State, they weren't great, allowing 25 points, but they did force 2 turnovers. But Penn State, they were able to get the win over Minnesota, and it was not a good performance, but I do have them at number 5. Fourth, I have Notre Dame. Notre Dame enters at number 4 after they demolished Army 49-14, and Notre Dame dominated the entire game. They took the lead early and never looked back. Offensively, Notre Dame is great. Riley Leonard threw for 2 touchdowns, and the Notre Dame run game was insane, as they ran for 275 yards and 5 touchdowns, including 130 yards and 2 touchdowns from running back Jeremiah Love, who did it on just 7 carries. Then defensively for Notre Dame, they also dominated, allowing just 14 points and 3.4 yards per play. But Notre Dame, after a dominant win over Army, I have them at number 4. Although I thought about putting them at number 3. But I've got Notre Dame at number 4. Third, I have Texas. So Texas, they remain at number 3 after a 31-14 win over Kentucky. Texas played well offensively. Quinn Ewers threw for 2 touchdowns, and Texas as a team ran for 251 yards and 2 scores. Then defensively, Texas also dominated, allowing just 14 points and forcing 2 turnovers. And Texas, after an easy win over Kentucky, they remain at number 3. Coming in at number 2, I have Ohio State. So Ohio State remains at number 2 after a dominant 38-15 win over Indiana. And this was a great performance for Ohio State, destroying another top 10 team. Ohio State started off slow, going 3-and-out on their first drive, and allowing Indiana to score on their opening drive. But after that, Ohio State dominated. Will Howard threw for 201 yards and had 3 total touchdowns. Ohio State was decent on the ground, rushing for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. But defensively is where Ohio State really dominated. They allowed just 153 total yards. They got to the quarterback 5 times, and Ohio State even returned a punt for a touchdown. But Ohio State, after a dominant win over a good Indiana team, they remain at number 2. And number 1, it remains Oregon. They were on a bye. They're 11-0. Next week, they play Washington. And my updated college football playoff predictions: my 1 seed remains Ohio State at 12-1, winning the Big Ten. My 2 seed is Texas at 12-1, winning the SEC. 3 seed is Miami at 12-1, winning the ACC. And my 4 seed, Boise State, at 12-1, winning the Mountain West. So I do have Boise State getting the 4th bye here. They were terrible this week, barely beating a bad Wyoming team. But this is more of the Big 12 destroying itself, with BYU and Colorado both losing. And because of that, I think that puts Boise State in a great position to get the 4th first-round bye. My 5 seed is Oregon at 12-1. 6 seed Notre Dame at 11-1. 7 seed is Penn State at 11-1. My 8 seed is Indiana, also at 11-1. My 9 seed is Georgia at 10-3. My 10 seed is Tennessee at 10-2. 11 seed is Arizona State at 11-2. I have them being the Big 12 champion. And my 12 seed remains SMU at 11-2. Well, those are my Week 14 college football rankings and my updated college football playoff predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications so you don't miss any of their upcoming videos. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.